sales order process in CenterPoint begins with either entering in a quote or a sales order. In the case of CenterPoint, those are entered in on the same screen. The sales order module is required for this process. To enter in a sales order, we're going to go to Processes and Sales. At the top of the menu here under Sales, you're going to see 3 options for sales orders. We're going to be talking about the first option today, which is the sales order entry screen or quote order entry screen. The second option, called the sales order quick entry, takes and abbreviates the upper screen. So if you find yourself not needing to display some of the details that are shown on the first tab here in the sales order entry, the sales order quick entry may be an option for you. The third screen, the sales order edit fill and invoice, will not only let you create a new sales order, but it will let you edit, fill, and invoice orders. The clicking on the new from this screen actually does take you to the sales orders screen that we're going to talk about today. So really the entry is the same on both of them. So we're going to go ahead and click on sales orders. When the sales order screen comes up, the first thing is it's going to ask you for a company, of course. And if you only have one company, it's going to default that company in the box. If you have more than one company, then either hitting the F4 key will bring up a lookup to look up the different companies you have, or if you click on the icon at the end of that field, which is a magnifying glass, that'll bring up a lookup showing you all of the companies you have available. You can select the one you want and then click OK. If you want this screen to have one of those companies be the default company all the time, you can select it and then right click and set it as the default. And then from now on, when you come to this screen, the company field would be filled out automatically. From there, it's going to go down to the customer field. Now, the customer field is another lookup field that works just like the company field. As a matter of fact, all the lookup fields work exactly the same way. If you hit an F4 on your keyboard, it'll bring up a lookup of all the different companies or customers available. Also, if you click on the icon at the end of the field, the magnifying glass icon, it brings up the same lookup of customers. So you can either select from an existing customer. If you are more keyboard oriented, your up and down arrow keys would allow you to scroll through the list of customers there. Or if you're more mouse oriented, you can scroll through the list using your mouse. When you find the one you want, you can just simply hit enter to select it. Now, next to the company name, there is a field for additional notes. So if you want to add additional notes or view additional notes that were out here for this particular company or this particular customer, you can. And when you do click on that, it brings up all previously entered in notes. When you want to enter in a new note, what you're going to do is, I'm going to actually get this one out of here. What you're going to do is you're going to click on the timestamp, and then you would go ahead and enter in any notes that you wanted to keep on that particular customer. So it's just a quick way to bring up those notes and see those notes during your data entry. From there, then, you'll also notice that by selecting the customer, there's a number of different fields that will fill in from the detail entered in on the customer record. One of those fields is the salesperson, and as you can see here, I have not entered in a default salesperson. I'm going to right click on the customer and go to edit them, and you'll see here on the setup of the customer that there was a field for salesperson. I just chose to not fill it in. Therefore, it did not default a salesperson in there. The same thing with any shipping methods, any payment terms that you've got assigned to that customer, FOB, and any sales tax. It'll also default in that customer's default billing address and their default shipping address. So all those things come in automatically when you go ahead and choose the customer. However, all of them can be overridden as you're entering in this transaction. After selecting the customer, it comes down to this field here where you get to select whether or not you're entering in a quote or an order. Basically, the difference is that when an order is entered in, the customer has already agreed to purchase the items, and entering in the sales order will commit any inventory items to that customer. So a quote is simply going ahead and quoting prices to a customer, but it's not making a commitment of any inventory items. So we're going to go ahead and enter in a sales order, and it goes ahead and it brings up the next sales order number in sequence. As a matter of fact, sales orders and quotes actually share the same sequence number. However, if you want to, you could add an additional sequence for quote numbers and have a separate sequence for quotes and a separate sequence for sales orders. To go ahead and add a new sequence, you could either right-click on the field here and go to New to create a new one, or you can choose to go to Setup and General and Numbering Sequences to add a new numbering sequence for quotes. Of course, just like any transaction in CenterPoint, we need to give a date to the sales order. And then we have a place here where you can put in the customer's PO number. So if they have a PO number that they've given to you, you can put that PO number in here. Once again, since I did not select a salesperson, this is an optional field. If you're not using salespeople or not identifying salespeople or don't even have salespeople, you could leave that field blank. However, if you are calculating commissions on salespeople, then you really do need to have that selected. So I can go ahead and select a particular salesperson there. From there, it takes us over to shipping methods. And once again, you know, if you haven't created those shipping methods or don't have the shipping method you need on the list, all you have to do is click New to create a new one. The same thing with payment terms. You can select from payment terms that have already been set up, or you can go ahead and create your own payment terms for this particular customer. On the FOB, you can go ahead and choose origin or destination. And then you have a place here to record the date that this particular item is required and the earliest date that you might want to go ahead and ship them. Those are optional. You don't have to fill those in, but if you're using them internally for something like that, they are available. It goes ahead and it brings in the sales tax from the customer record. You can change the sales tax here, but another thing that happens is if you happen to have multiple addresses for that particular customer, as I do here, I have different shipping addresses for this customer. I have a Red Wing, Minnesota one and a Randolph, Minnesota one. If I wanted to ship to the other location, that particular location actually might have a different sales tax and a different shipping method. So those two items are actually tied to the address there. So I'm going to go back to Red Wing and you'll see my sales tax change back to Red Wing. Okay, one other piece of information that does come in automatically from the customer record as well is there is a place to enter in a memo on each customer. And if you did enter in the memo, then it would be showing up here in the Memo 2 field. There is also an additional Memo 1 field that can be used for entering in some sort of a memo that you want to print on the sales order or quote. When entering in a sales order or quote, you can go ahead and put it on hold if it's something that you're have some questions on or something like that, where you just don't want this to be turned into an invoice at any point yet, and just leave it on hold. You can go ahead and do that, and leaving it on hold will mean that somebody couldn't fill it and turn it into an invoice. Okay, we'll come back and talk about these buttons over here. Until then, we're going to actually go up here to the top where we see that we have two tabs. So this first tab that we've been entering on is the Select tab. The details of the order are entered in on the Order tab. Okay, up at the top for the customer, it's going to display that customer's current balance. So right now that customer looks like it has a deposit out there. So they have a negative $2,000 balance. They have a credit limit of $123,000 and they have remaining credit of $125,000, which would be the addition of those two. Okay, from there then you're going to notice two grids. Up here is the grid where we're going to select the items that we're selling, whether they're sales items, inventory items, service items. You're going to go ahead and select the items that you are selling. And then down here at the bottom is what we call the information grid. As I select an item here, there's additional information that we might want to have displayed about that item. So for example, if it's an inventory item, I might want to know how many of them I have on hand, how many of them are available to sell, how many have already been assigned on other previous sales orders. So those are additional pieces of information that I might want to display about that item. But both of these are grids and both of them allow me to add additional columns to them. So I could right click here and go to add remove columns. And you see the check marks in all of the columns that are already been added to this screen. So I can take off any columns that maybe I don't need. Maybe I don't use substitutes. So maybe I'd like to take that particular column off. And maybe I want to add something such as the location. So I might want to add which store this particular sale was out of. So I can take this selected column and move it up with the other selected columns by clicking this top button. So now you see it's up here. And if I want to change the order of the columns and place this location right next to the profit center, I can just highlight it and use these arrow buttons to move it up. So the order from top to bottom is going to represent the order from left to right. You have those same right click options down here at the bottom to add and remove additional columns there. So the idea would be that the columns that you might need to enter in would be up at the top where you might need to do data entry, but columns that are just displaying information about the item that are selected could remain down here at the bottom. So for here, you could right click and add any columns or remove any columns that are currently showing. So I'm going to start my data entry by going ahead and selecting an item. I could either select that item by typing in the item number or the abbreviation of the item, or I can go ahead and type in part of the name of it, or I can click on the lookup to find the item. So either way, or any of those ways works. The first item I'm going to select is actually an inventory item of ours, and I'm going to say that we are going ahead and selling an economy bike package to this customer. Actually, we're going to sell several of them. So we're going to put in a sales order for 12 of them. I can see down here at the bottom that I have 45 on hand. 10 of those have already been assigned. So I actually have 35 available to sell there. Okay, not shipping it now, so I don't need to ship it. On the unit of measure, if there were multiple units of measure that I sell this particular product in, I could select the appropriate unit of measure. That particular item only had 1 unit of measure on it. It has a description field here for me to, and this is the description that would show up on the invoice for this particular item. There is also, when you set up the item, a place where you can enter in an additional description. I can override either one of those here at the data entry. So I could go ahead and override the description name, or I could add here to the additional description. So I could say something like it includes bike helmet, tire pressure monitor, and pump. Okay, and that information also will print on the sales order. Okay, it went ahead and it defaulted in the price for this item because I set up that price when I set up the item. And then it went ahead and it calculated the amount. I can override that price. So if I've set up some special pricing for this particular customer for this particular sales order, I can override that. I'm going to go ahead and choose my profit center. And then over here, I'm going to go ahead and choose my location that this is the Illinois, or I'm sorry, the Minnesota store that we have sold this out of. Okay, from there, I'm going to come down to my next line item. Now notice when I'm highlighted on the next line item that it clears the information grid. So on this line, I'm going to go ahead and choose bike tour, that they purchased some tickets for a bike tour for us from us, and they went ahead and they purchased 18 of those. Now notice with this particular item, since it's set up as a service item, that there is no additional information really to display because it doesn't show me any quantity on hand or anything like that for any service items. So if most of your items are either non-tracked or service items, this grid might not be very useful for you. So you do have the option of turning off that grid. You can turn off that grid by going to options and say that you don't want to show the information grid, and then that gives you more room to show the detail lines. Okay, I'm going to put the information grid back on, but I wanted to show you how you can go ahead and get rid of that if you don't want it. So with the bike tour, I could go ahead, and if I had units of measure set up for it, I could go ahead and select units of measure. But they're ordering 10 of them, or 18 of them, and I have not gone ahead and put a price on there. So it went ahead and brought in a price of 0, and I could go ahead and type in the price there. And I'm going to go ahead and once again choose my profit center, since I am using profit centers, and then that was the Minnesota store. Okay, so I can continue to add items to this sales order. Down here at the bottom, as when I'm done, there is a place here for me to put in the freight. If I know what the freight charge is going to be at this time, I can also add the freight when I make it an invoice. The same thing with any miscellaneous charges. It is calculating the sales tax. If I want to see the detail of that, to see the different jurisdictions, I can go ahead and see the detail of that. And you could actually override the sales tax from within there. If there were any trade discounts that were calculated, those discounts would be showing up here in the box down below. And if the customer had any deposits, those deposits would show up in the box over here. So if I want to go ahead and apply that deposit to the sales order, I could go ahead and click on the deposits. And then you can see already that the $2,000 was already applied. It was applied automatically. And the reason that it was applied automatically is because of an option over here to apply customer deposits. It's set up to automatically apply the customer deposit. Your other option is to manually apply it. Either way, you can override that setting by clicking on the deposits button. And if I don't want to go ahead and apply that deposit, I can just go ahead and remove that. Okay, it also is going to show me up at the top what the term discount would be if they make that payment within 10 days there, which is what my term was set up to be. So that's the discount that they would receive on this particular order. If I don't want it to calculate any term discounts, I can also override that. So you get both of those options. I'm going to click OK. Now, each one of these obviously is an expense of some sort or a liability of some sort. So to see what accounts those are going to post to, I could click on the accounts button down here at the bottom, and it would show me the accounts that have been set up to have those post to. Now, those will go ahead and post to those accounts, but where did we actually set up those defaults? The place that we go ahead and set up those defaults is actually under File and Preferences. And if I come over here to Customer Invoices, there's an option there for defaults. And over here on the Database tab is where I would set up the defaults for all of those different things. So here's my freight income. Here's my customer deposits account where it looks for the customer deposits and so on. So this is where I would look to find that information or to set defaults for that information. Right, so I'm actually ready to go ahead and save this transaction. Just a couple things I want to point out over here. Number one is if this particular transaction were selling some items that currently are not in stock, I might want to create a purchase order to purchase those items. So from the sales order, I could go ahead and create a purchase order to purchase those items. Okay, but I don't need to do that. So I'm going to go over here back to the select tab. And before I hit save on this, I could hit save from the other screen. But before I hit save, I just want to point out that if you want this to print out the sales order document, you would want to make sure that this was marked to print the order, and then the printer, and then the order form would be selected over here. If they're set up to email those sales orders, this box would have been checked by default. Now that's all part of the customer record, how you want them set, whether you want them set to be emailed to the customer or whether you want it set to be printed by default. Those are both settings within the customer setup. The third icon over here is a scanning icon. So if I have a document that I want to scan in and attach to this transaction, I can simply click on that icon to scan it in. However, you do at one time before you get to this point, do need to set up your scanner, and you would do that under File and Scanners, and that's where you would go to set up your scanner. Okay, if it is a document that you already have in some sort of a digital file, we can go ahead and attach that file, such as a PDF file, to this particular transaction as well by clicking on the paperclip icon there, and then clicking the attach button, and then browsing out for the location in which that particular document is located. And then click open, and then the document will be attached then to this particular transaction. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click save, and that is sales orders entry.